Well, good afternoon, guys. This is Max House from Gulf Shores, Alabama. It's Sunday, March 30th, 2025, and I'm just here to share some things that I've been thinking about for several months now when it comes to LifeWave and investing. And really, this isn't for necessarily people that are just now getting introduced to LifeWave. This is more for people that have been around it, kind of understand what these patches are all about, what they do, what they're supposed to do, and all that. And I hope you have a little bit of understanding about LifeWave. But over the several months that we've been doing this, we've actually been working at LifeWave now for about almost a year and a half. We started right around Thanksgiving of 2024, and or actually 2023. But in dealing with people, the thing that, in interacting, dialoguing with people, the feedback we've gotten from so many of our distributors is that they get people started, and somewhere along the line, maybe 1 month, 2 months, 3 months into it, they say, "Oh, I really like the patches, but they're just so expensive." And I don't know how they can say that honestly. And that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about the best investment. So, what is the best investment? Is it silver? Is it gold? Is it Bitcoin? Is it Tesla? I mean, there's a lot of good investments out there, but what is the best investment? I don't know about where you live, but we live down here on the Gulf Coast. And there's a lot of retired people here, and about 3, 4, 5 times a year, we get these little cards in the mail inviting us to come to some free dinner, and they're always serviced these great steaks, these great meals, and it's free, and you just come and they talk to you about their approach to investing. So Wendy and I, over the last 6, 7 years, have probably been to 20 of these free dinners. And we love them. We never really get involved because we have our own ideas about investing, but we always take advantage of these meals. So as I began to kind of think about this problem that people seem to run into about that these patches are expensive. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. Let's see if we can't come to an agreement about what is a good investment and what does it actually look like in real life, in our lives, and as we age. Because as we know, the LifeWave patches, beyond just straight up healing, it's, in my mind, it's all about longevity. It's about quality of life as we age. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about. There's 3 things that you probably need to know. The first thing is that this talk is really for me. It's for you, it's for whoever else you think might benefit, but it's really for me, because in just pondering this out over the last several months, it's really helped me to, every time I put those patches on, and if you're like me, maybe you are, maybe you aren't, every time I put on a patch, I thought, is this really worth it? It just seems like it's just, there's money, there's an investment in this. And so the thing you need to know about me is that in my family, at least, I'm known as being tight, very frugal. And if you're ever around my son, he loves to tell stories about his dad. And one of the house family history stories is about when my kids were, I think my daughter was maybe 10, 11, Christian was 13, 14. And we lived out in the country, and we had a wood stove downstairs, but we also had a propane stove upstairs. And it was always a fight because my daughter Michelle and my wife Wendy were always wanting, they'd get up in the morning. I'd have a fire going downstairs that would heat the house to my comfort level, but they'd get up and it wasn't warm enough for them. So instead of turning the thermostat up to 76, 77, for some reason, they seemed to think that if they cranked it up to 85 or something like that, that it would warm up quicker. And so every day there'd be a battle over the thermostat. And I said, it doesn't get any warmer any quicker if it's set on 85 as opposed to 76. which is probably their comfort level. And so finally, after several months of battling that, I actually physically went, got a small nail and drove it into the wall, because we had one of those old school thermostats with the little lever on the side. And so I put it where they couldn't turn that thing up above 76. Oh, the harassment I got for that from my daughter, my wife, and of course my son just laughed. But that just kind of speaks to my thoughts on money and saving and all that. It just didn't make sense to me to have, because sometimes when I wasn't around, they would forget about what the thermostat was set at, and it would actually get up to 85, which takes a lot of propane. And they didn't really have to pay attention to every time that propane tank was filled, because it cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So anyway, that's just a story. Kind of, Wendy and I are both very frugal people in reality, but this has helped me just in pondering this to really realize the benefit of putting these patches on day after day after day. Another thing you need to know about me, let's get rid of that, is that I've been diagnosed with a terminal disease called SICTAS, SICTAS. And what is that? It's sin-induced chronic terminal aging syndrome. You can see it here on the screen. Sin-induced chronic terminal aging syndrome. And I'm sorry to say that at some point I'm going to age out. I'm going to die. And truth is, so are you, so is everybody you know. And that's just the nature of the world we live in. I want to throw in a couple of scriptures that I've come across over the last several months. This is out of Psalm 90, verse 10. It says, "As for the days of our life, they contain 70 years, or if due to strength, 80 years. So teach us to number our days, O Lord, that we may present to you a heart of wisdom." And then there's another scripture in Proverbs 3. I think we all know that what's before this is about trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. But just a little bit beyond that, I was reading this maybe a month ago, and I came across this verse. It's in verse 7 and 8. It says, "Do not be wise in your own eyes, for fear the Lord and turn away from evil, and it will be healing." I got it on the screen here. "It will be healing to your body and refreshment to your bones." Think about that. Think about that promise, that if we walk with the Lord and we're not wise in our own eyes, and we've learned to fear the Lord, to really understand that God's in charge of it all, and if we learn to fear him and walk with him day after day after day in that loving relationship, that here's the promise, that it will be healing to your body and refreshment to your bones. To me, that's now knowing a little bit more about the human body, because for the most part, God really deals with us according to the processes that he's established in the body. So when I read that, knowing a little bit more now about stem cells and collagen, think about that. It'll be healing to your body. And in other words, it's going to enhance the efficacy of our stem cells. And it's also, because it's healing and refreshing to the bones, it's actually increasing our collagen. That's how I see it. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but I don't think so, because I can see that as we delight in the Lord and walk with him, then we can begin to really almost supercharge the efficacy of the patches that we're wearing. And I think that's a phenomenal promise for those of us that know the Lord and understand his word and his promises. So anyway, that's kind of a freebie. I want to throw that in there because I find it very significant, and we can kind of, in essence, take it to the bank. So now, let's talk about investing. So here's some definitions of investing. Let me scroll it down just a little bit. To invest is to devote one's time, effort, energy, or financial resources to a particular undertaking with the expectation of a worthwhile result. Let me read that one more time. To devote one's time, effort, energy, or financial resources to a particular undertaking with the expectation of a worthwhile result. The second definition, the hope / expectation for a positive addition or even multiplication of the resources allotted to any calculated endeavor. In other words, whatever we do in the way of investing, our hope is that we either get an addition or even a multiplication of that which we invest. It's just kind of the nature of a seed, and we plant a small seed and we can end up with thousands or hundreds of thousands of seeds and plants from that one seed. So that's kind of one of the things that God has built into creation. And here's the third definition, is to sacrifice today's pleasures for tomorrow's plenty. You see that? To sacrifice, in other words, it's going to cost something. It's going to take some giving up of certain things. But what? So we sacrifice today's pleasure, today's comfort, today's resources, whatever it might be, for tomorrow's plenty. Now, let's translate that into our lives. I know most of the people that we deal with, not exclusively, but for the most part, we deal with a lot of people that are in their late 50s, early 60s, 70s, some 80s and beyond. But what could be, in my mind anyway, what could be more worthwhile than sacrificing some of our finances, our resources today for a better, healthier, even a longer life? Now, I'm going to be turning 75 in about 2 weeks, and it's hard for me to believe that I'm 75. I feel, I don't know how old I look, but I know I feel like I'm 55 or even younger. I feel great. I have great energy. I have great mental clarity. I have a lot of zest for life. And I know that comes from sowing seed and investing that Wendy and I really started clear back in 1988. And I'm going to get a little bit more into that in just a little bit. But I know that investment is paying incredible dividends today for me and for Wendy and I as a couple. So just remember those definitions, because I hope you can kind of take a screenshot of these, because these definitions are very pertinent to what we're going to be talking about. So let's get here and let's talk about, it's too expensive. And I say, compared to what? Compared to what? So before we talk about how much something costs, we really need to talk about how many. What do you mean by that, Max? How many? Well, how many hearts do we get? How many livers do we get? How many kidneys do we get? We do get 2 kidneys, which is awesome. And if our heart fails us, that's the end of it. How many brains do we get? How many organs do we get? I mean, that's what when we talk about investing, that's what we're talking about. So kind of join me just a little bit for a little bit of a flight of fancy here, but just imagine, close your eyes even, and just imagine that you're just turned 16 years old and your dad comes in and, happy birthday to you, you're 16. And he holds up some car keys and he said, son, daughter, I bought you a brand new, and you fill in the blank, whatever, when you were 16, just imagine what car, what vehicle back when you were 16 was like the end all and the be all. So let's say it's a Cadillac Eldorado or or something like that, whatever was big when I was a kid. But the thing here's the catch. So he hands you those keys and he looks you in the eye and says, but you need to understand this. This is a brand new car and it's been looked over and it's all ready to go. But this is the only car that you get from now at 16 until the day you die. This is the only car you get. And what if that were true? What if this was the only car that you got to have for your entire life till the day you die? How would there be any price too high to keep that car in tip-top shape? Would you ever skip an oil change? Would you ever not rotate the tires? Would you ever not, if you wouldn't ignore that warning light that comes on the dash? As my pastor said, whenever he had a warning light come on when he was younger, he'd just put a piece of black tape over it so he couldn't see it. Well, that's all funny and we chuckle at that, but the truth is we can't afford to do that because this is the only car that we're going to have till the day we die. And so my guess is, my assumption is that we would all take extra special care of that car. I mean, isn't that right? Isn't that what we would do in reality if we knew for sure that that was the only car we were ever going to have? Well, truth is, that's the nature of the body that God gives. You know, the Bible says that we're fearfully and wonderfully made, but we have one life and we can either take care. It's really a matter of stewardship, that we can either take care of this incredibly priceless gift that God has given us in this body. And I say all this we can't make our bodies an idol, okay? Well, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying that it's a matter of stewardship. We've been blessed with a body, and we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And so if we translate that story about one car and one car only over into this body in our lives, then we can begin to understand that there really is no price too great to pay to keep that vehicle in tip-top running condition at all times. And when things go bad, we need to figure out a way to take care of them without exacerbating any of the problems, which a lot of times is what big pharma and drugs do. They exacerbate problems. Instead of solving them, they exacerbate them. But that's a whole diatribe for another time. But I think many of you know what I'm talking about. So everybody say after me, I only get one body. And if you can say that and understand it, I think everything else is going to make sense. So when it comes to investing, we're talking about ROI. What does ROI stand for? Return on investment. So what in the investing world, what would be an adequate return on investment on any given investment? 10%, 15%, 20%? You know, they say the average, I think the stock market, you can expect anywhere from 12 to 16%. I'm not an expert in this, but just from what I've been exposed to, that seems to be a pretty safe number, sometimes 20% and beyond. But, so then number B is, what is the average life expectancy? Well, I actually Googled this to find out. And the average life expectancy for people in the United States is 82.2 years old. That's pre-COVID. Now, I think since COVID, it's gone down some, but that's a pre-COVID estimate. And, you know, I've seen these ads on YouTube and on TV over the last year or two about, there's some drug out there, and it doesn't matter what the name of it is, but it talks about for people that have lung cancer that are in the final stages, that they can take this drug and it will give them, get this, I don't know what the expensive, but I'm assuming it's pretty dang high, but it'll give them an extra 5 months of life. 5 months. And the ads show a grandmother spending that extra 5 months they have with their grandkids and all that, and they kind of work on your emotions. And that, that really makes sense. I think as we get older, we understand the value of those extra months. So, but that's the beauty of these patches and what they offer, is that we can begin to invest $3 to $5 a day, let's say, put these patches on, and begin to turn around years and years of damage and deterioration. And like I say, this is for people that already understand the LifeWave thing and the LifeWave science and the studies and all that. So I'm not trying to get into all that, but if you're somewhat new to that, I say get in and study the studies, the all the things that verify exactly what these. So one of those is that according to an independent study, this isn't LifeWave study, this is an independent study. It shows that for every 6 weeks that you're on these patches, you get 8 weeks of additional life, or and this study is particular to the heart and circulatory system. So for every 6 weeks that you're wearing these patches every day, 12 hours on, 12 hours off, 12 hours on, 12 hours off, that you get an extra 8 weeks. Your heart actually decreases in age by 8 weeks for every 6 weeks. Now think about that. Now, Wendy and I have been on these patches, as I said, for about 18 months now, give or take a little bit. And that actually adds up to 2 years of additional quality of life. Because it's about a 1.33, 133%. So not only do we get the year and a half that we've lived wearing these patches, but beyond that year and a half we've lived, we get an additional 2 years. And this is all verified. This is all documented. This isn't smoke and mirrors and pie in the sky. This is real stuff. And I tell you, and in reality, I've heard David Schmidt, the inventor and the CEO of LifeWave, talk about where they've actually done studies that people that have been on these patches for 6 months to a year have actually decreased in age by somewhere between 6 to 9 or 10 years. That's amazing. And when David Schmidt shares this stuff, he's not shooting from the hip, because he knows he's liable for those types of statements that he makes in public. So I'm talking about investing. I'm going to take that to the bank, because I really believe that that's true. I really believe that that's what's going on right now in my body. I can feel the difference in my aging process. I really can. I don't know how many, I'm really going to date myself, but I don't know if you guys remember a comedian from back in the 50s and 60s. His name was Jack Benny. And Jack Benny he was a hoot. I mean, he just was hilarious. And he had this certain shtick about how tight, how cheap he was about everything. He always dressed very dapper. And one of his skits that he did was he was going to someone's house, and just before he went in their house, some guy came out of the bushes and put a gun in his ribs and says, "Hey, buddy, your money or your life?" And there was dead silence. And the guy waited for like 10 seconds. He says, "Buddy," I said, "your money or your life?" And Jack Benny, in his very sarcastic voice, says, I'm thinking. In other words, he really had to weigh out, would I rather give up my life and save my money? And we laugh about that, but that's really kind of, in a way, how we're wired. That's really why I'm talking about this, is that's what we're faced with in this scenario of putting the patches on every day. Is it our money or our longevity? Is it our money or sickness? Is it our money or our quality of life is just down to nothing? And I think that if we can get a handle on that, we'd be way better served when it comes to, because like I say, I don't know about you guys, but every morning I put those patches on, I do count the cost. I really do. And I just know that these things are such a great benefit. And I hope you guys realize that too. And I'm sure most of you do, but I'm sure you're dealing with people that's all, oh, they're too expensive. Oh, that just cost too much, So I have to ask so let's say for instance, that you're 62 years old right now. And so the average life expectancy is 82. So here's a question to ask yourself. Would your 82-year-old self, what do you think your 82-year-old self is going to say when you get to that point where you're 82? Are you going to look back and thank that 62-year-old for making the choice to invest in your future self at 82, that quality of life, zest for life, health, well-being? Or is that 82-year-old say, boy, I sure wish you hadn't spent that money because I could be living in a much nicer home. I could be living a lot better because I'd have more money in the bank. And so just ponder that question, because it's really at the crux of what we're talking about. Remember, a giving up comfort and sacrifice, or making sacrifice today for some plenty, some better situation in the future. So just a little history. Wendy and I started on the path of alternative health. In other words, moving away from the Western medical model of drugs and surgeries and all that. We've moved away from that a lot, probably 90%, since 1988. And that's really when Wendy began to pursue her naturopathy, get her degree. And we started, instead of investing money and going to doctors and taking drugs and all that, because I was dealing with I was dealing with heart issues at 38, 39. I was gallbladder issues, gallstones. I had a lot of problems, and I was only 38 years old at the time. And our son was battling diabetic symptoms. And so that's what started on that path. And I've kind of run the numbers, and I don't know how accurate they are, but in reality, since 1988, Wendy and I have spent, between us and our family and whatnot, we've spent on average about $500 a month on alternative health, supplements, chiropractic, just different things. $500 a month. Now, sometimes it's been more than that, sometimes less, but that's probably a good mean average of what we've spent. And I ran those numbers today, and I about tipped over. $500 a month since 1988 adds up to, where am I at? $222,000, give or take a few thousand. That's what we spent. Almost $250,000 we'd spent on between Wendy and I, and early on when we had our kids at home, our families. And so I go, gee, what if I would have invested that in silver or gold or something? Wouldn't I have been, I probably would have a lot more money, but I really don't believe I'd have the quality of life that I have now. In fact, I know I wouldn't. I don't even think I'd be here today. I know for sure Wendy would not be here today without that kind of investment. So $250,000 compared to the life that we have and the impact we make and all that, it's just, it really is chump change in many ways. And I hope you understand what I'm saying, because this is real stuff. This is the nitty gritty. This gets down to the realities of life and what we choose to spend our money on. Again, I say it's a matter of stewardship. So there's a general statistic, and this is from 15, 20 years ago, and I don't know if it holds true today, but it says that 80% of all accumulated wealth is consumed, devoured in the last 2 years of life. Think about that. 80% of all accumulated wealth is spent trying to stay alive the last 2 years of life. Now, in reality, since that study came out, insurance plays a big part in this, and I don't want to get too far afield when it comes to insurance, but really, insurance, in a lot of ways, it's a way that the powers that be control us. So how many times have you talked to somebody and talked to them about the patches or some other great supplement or whatever, and they say, oh, I'd really be into that if only my insurance company would pay for it. I'd be all over that, but they won't pay for it, so I'll just go to the doctor and you know, they cover my drugs, so for the most part. So I'm just saying it's a way to control us. And sometimes we just got to break free of that and make our own choices, even though it's money out of pocket. Trust me, it's the best money we could ever spend. All right, so here's something I looked up. It's amazing what you can find on the Google machine. And I looked these up. And there again, you might want to take a screenshot of this because this is current as of, I think, 2024. So, as I say, we're all kind of moving into those years where nursing homes and in-home health care are on the horizon. And so in the state of Alabama, where we live, for a semi-private room, I'm going to point at for a semi-private room, it's $7,604 a month for one person to be in a private room in a nursing home facility. That means you only have half that space. And in the state of California, that is actually $10,390 a month for one person to be in a semi-private room. For a private room in Alabama, it's $8,000 and some change, and in the state of California, it's $12,900. And the reason I chose those two states is, one, I live in Alabama, and really Alabama tends to be at the lower end of everything as far as cost of living and all that. So I thought that was a good place to start. And then California, I'm sure, along with New York State, would be at the high end of these numbers. But you get the idea. So, but in-home nursing, let's say, oh no, but we'll get in-home nursing. Well, that costs anywhere from $3,800 in the state of Alabama to $6,400 a month in the state of California. So, and trust me, those expenses are going up and up and up. So let's say that you circumvent having to go into the nursing home by 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. So that would be in the state of California. Let's go with that. So that's almost $120,000 a year that you're not going to have to spend because you're in good enough shape to stay in your own home and take care of yourself. 120. So remember, I just showed you that figure for 38 years. Wendy and I have spent $222,000 between us on alternative health modalities. And in 2 years, you will have spent $240,000 if you live in the state, if you have to go into full-time nursing care situation. So all of a sudden, that what seemed like a lot, that $250,000 that I said that we spent, all of a sudden seems like, wow, that's money pretty well spent. Because I God's in control. So I can't say that I'm not going to be in a nursing home in a year or two. I don't think so. I really don't think I'm going to need anything like that till I'm in my late 80s, early 90s. Of course, I could step out tomorrow and be run over by a bus or something. So you don't know. And I'm not trying to make any promises. I'm just saying that just if all things are equal, this is the reality. At some point, all that accumulated wealth is going to be devoured being in these situations that we probably really don't want to be in any sooner than we have to. And also just the median monthly expenditure for medications, that's out of pocket. And this is from age 65 to 79. A national average is almost $500 a month. So remember that $500 a month that I said Wendy and I were spending since 1988? Well, there it is. And that's the median. And that's with a lot of insurance backup. That's not paying 100%. That's with the insurance backup. That's the median out-of-pocket expense. So all of a sudden, all this stuff begins to make a lot more sense. And so that's why when I first got into this about investing, and before I finish up, I'm going to go back to those 3 definitions and see if it doesn't make a little more sense. So let's go to one more page. All right. So, in-home health care. So there's caretakers and there's caregivers. Now, just let's take away the word care. Let's say there's takers and there's givers. So you have to ask yourself, do I want to be a caretaker or do I want to be positioned to be a caregiver? And in reality, many spouses, this is the dilemma as you get older you're faced with. Am I going to be a caretaker or am I going to be a caregiver? And I don't know about you, but I want to be a caregiver. I want to be there for Wendy. I want to be there and be able to do everything I can do to make our life in our home as feasible, as comfortable as possible as I can. And because if I don't take care of myself, if I don't do the things I know to do as far as what I eat, what I exercise, all these things, if I don't do some of these things, then I'm going to end up being a caretaker, and somebody else is going to have to take up the slack. And I really, as much as I can, I want to, again, I say I use this word many times so far, but this is a stewardship issue, and I want to be a caregiver. I want to be the one that's giving, that's done what's needed to be done to be in a place of caregiving instead of caretaking. Okay, so I think you get it. And so, guys, let's go all the way back to the beginning. Okay, so let's go. Whoops. Let's go to these definitions. So, to invest is to devote one's time, effort, energy, or financial resources to a particular undertaking with the expectation of a worthwhile result. Well, in this case, what the worthwhile result is being positioned to be a caregiver. Okay? Healthy, sound mind. And there again, we can't control all this, but we can do what we can do in a stewardship sense to do what we can do to be positioned to be the best caregiver that we can be. Number 2 is the hope, expectation for a positive addition or even multiplication of the resources allotted to us in any calculated endeavor. And there again, this life is a one-time gift, just like that car. It's a one-time gift. It's all we get. Are we going to take care of it? Are we going to invest in it? Are we going to do whatever we can do to take care of what we've been entrusted with? That's a good investment. And number 3, to sacrifice today's pleasure for tomorrow's plenty. So what's today's pleasure? I could, go out and buy myself a new set of golf clubs. I could buy a brand new car. Wendy and I have been driving a 2008 Honda Odyssey now for the last 7-8 years. It's the only car we have. We have no expenditure. So whatever, if we were paying a $300, $400, $500 a month car payment, that would make sense. I mean, we've had seasons in the past where we've leased cars and we've had lots of overhead when it comes to transportation. But at some point we decided that's just not the way for us to go. Let's take that money and invest it into ourselves and into our health and into our future well-being. And so that's what we've done. So we've sacrificed today's pleasure for tomorrow's plenty. And so with that, guys, I want to thank you. I hope this has been food for thought. I hope this has been something that you can kind of mull over and talk with your spouse about, and maybe realize, hey, we need to wear more patches. We need to do more as stewards of this body that God's entrusted to us, of this life and this being effective and being out there and giving instead of being a taker. So bottom line, ask yourself, do I want to be a caretaker, or am I going to choose to be a caregiver? Guys, I love you. I hope this is helpful. I hope it makes sense. And I just hope that there'll be some fruit that comes out of this little conversation we've had this afternoon. Thank you, guys.